Hey guys, this is Carnivore5 and today I have another video for you guys talking about pure analog hitting. This is going to go over the basics of pure analog hitting, the pros and cons, as well as give you a few pointers. First things first, you want to make sure you go to options, go to gameplay, and select pure analog. It is one of the 3 hitting interfaces in the game. We've already went over zone and directional, so now it's time to talk about pure analog. Alright, so there's 2 different analog types you can do for pure analog. Obviously you're going to be using the analog, so the input type is locked, you have to use the right stick. However, there are 2 distinct ways to hit with analog, and they're a lot different actually. You have the flick option, and then you have the stride option. I would recommend the flick since stride doesn't really give you an advantage anymore. Now, back in the day, I'm talking MLB 12 through probably 14, you know, when I was playing online a lot, there was a lot of good users that used analog hitting, and back then you only could use stride. And really the one advantage analog hitting gave you was you really didn't have to be as precise with your PCI because you really weren't controlling it. The only thing you do to control it is, if you want to move your PCI to the left part of the plate, you press down and up and to the left. Now if you want to do it to the right, it's down, up and to the right, and if you just want to focus on hitting pitches down the middle, it's straight down and straight up. That's really all they had to do. The strike zone was cut into threes for them, so it was a little bit easier. But at the same time, I didn't really feel comfortable hitting like that. I still preferred zone, but it was definitely a competitive way to still hit back then. Nowadays, you really can't hit like it. Let's go ahead and talk about the stride option since we're already talking about it a little bit. But also, one of the huge advantages the stride gave you back in the day was if you had good timing with your stride, it actually expanded your PCI a little bit. It made your PCI a little bit bigger. So it wasn't too bad. And I just could not get the hang of it. I just preferred zone. So there definitely was a different skill factor. And that was something cool about MLB The Show back in the day. There was 2 totally different ways to hit, but both of them offered, you know, pros and cons. There's a good little hit. So here's the stride. Now the problem with the stride is, again, they don't require you to have good timing with a stride anymore. There's no stride feedback, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what you do as far as stride timing. I could time the stride perfectly, you know, press back, or I could just sit here and hold it the whole time while he pitches. And look at this, you know, still hit it. And there's really no downside to that. I mean, if you're playing, you know, a franchise or something and you want realism, I would still try to time it because it looks really silly. But otherwise, yeah, there's really no benefit to it. Now, if there's some other, you know, hidden feedback or attributes that we don't know of, you know, then maybe it affects it, but I really don't think it does at all from what I've tested it over the past few years. So stride is real nice. It does feel pretty good when you hit, so it is a lot of fun to use this like in a franchise or road of the show. And if you want to use it online, you know, be my guest. Now, I would say compared to directional, it is a much more viable option to hit like this. However, compared to zone, zone is still master. Zone gives you the most control. Zone's the hardest to use, but gives you the most control. It has the highest upside, and that's what it's all about. If you're trying to play online and be competitive, you want your inputs to matter more than anything else. Analog's kind of in the middle between directional and zone. You have a, you know, I would say a medium amount of user input, but there's really about a medium ceiling for it, if that makes any sense. There's not like a super high ceiling like zone. There's not a super low ceiling like directional with all the RNG. So it can be a fun way to hit. So let's talk about analog a little bit more. Like I was saying before, if I'm getting a pitch inside, what I want to do is, after my stride, I want to push the stick up and to the left. Now it's the opposite if he pushes it, or excuse me, if Verlander throws on the outside, I want to go up and to the right and go with it. And if it's down the middle, you really can do anything. You can go straight up, trying to hit straight up the middle, or you can pull it or push it. You have a lot of options if they throw meatballs. And similar to the other interfaces, your timing is going to affect where you hit the ball at. So for instance, if there's a ball on the outside corner and I press my stick up and to the right, if I'm early on it, I'm still going to pull it. It's going to hit to the left side of the field. So timing still dictates where the ball is going to be hit. It's realistic. It makes sense. So just because, you know, I'm pushing my analog up and to the right doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to hit it up and to the right unless I have that good timing, or, you know, I'm just late on the pitch. So don't let that confuse you. Now, if you guys are zone users and you want to try this, or if you've just been playing the game for a while, you guys can see you do get some PCI feedback. So your PCI feedback is kind of random. Like I said, the only control you have of it is on the horizontal axis. Now, if you don't, what I'm saying is you don't really have much control on the vertical axis, but the horizontal axis, like I said before, you can cut the strike zone into 3 different parts. So you can determine whether or not your PCI is going to be on the inner third, the middle, or the outer third. But you can't control whether or not your PCI is going to be above or below the strike zone, meaning you really don't have much influence if you hit grounders or not. The best influence you can have is if you hit a pitch up in the strike zone, you're more likely to hit a line drive or fly ball. And then if it's pitched lower, you're more likely to hit a ground ball. So that's really as much influence as you can have with your hits there as far as it goes on the vertical axis. It can be really random. So again, there is some RNG with analog, but you do have a little bit more user control directional. So if you're to pick one of the two, if you're a new player and you just want to play, offline, and you just cannot do zone, I would recommend, trying out analog, get a feel for it. This is the stride timing I'm doing, by the way. Now I'm going to switch over and talk about flick. It's the same concept, but I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me, but it's a little easier to use. So flick, all you're really doing is pretty much what it says. You flick the stick up, either up and to the right, up and up and to the left, or straight up. Now I think it's I don't know. I think it might be a little bit easier to check your swing with these analog controls, but I don't know. Flick doesn't really feel right to me, but it is easier. And you also have the flick and stride options for all hitting. You can, if you wanted to, you could combine analog inputs with zone or directional. So I mean, you have like honestly 10 or 12 different ways to hit if you factor all of the different options. But talking about flick here with analog, it's pretty much the same thing, except there's no stride. And again, the stride doesn't really give you a benefit. It's really just there for a realism factor. If you guys like playing like that, I know there's a lot of people that played MLB back in the day, and they kind of like that stride. So if you guys really want a challenge or something, play Road to the Show, play franchise, try turn on that stride. Try doing zone plus analog with stride if you really want some. If you really want a challenge and play on Legend. You can definitely get some realism there. But again, if we're just talking about competitive online play, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage of using this interface because there is a lot of dice rolls and RNG, and you just don't have as much control, with the PCI. So your user inputs do not matter as much when using analog. They matter a little bit, but not as much as they would with zone hitting. But if you're new to online and you just cannot get a grasp of the zone interface and you want to be somewhat competitive, try out analog. It's honestly a lot better than directional, and it's really not that hard to get the hang of. So that's pretty much it for the video, guys. Keep in mind, one thing I didn't really go over was there's still a lot of simulation and dice rolls for each pitch, so your attributes matter a lot. Whereas zone, if you have a guy like Joey Gallo, you can just square. If you're a good hitter, you can square up the ball left and right and never strike out. But if you have a guy with low plate vision and you're going up against a pitcher with a high K per 9, you're probably going to strike out randomly, even if you have good timing swings. So I just want to throw that out there before I end this video. But let me know if you guys have any more questions about analog hitting or any of the interfaces for that matter. Thanks for watching the video, guys. This is Car number 5 signing out. Peace.